We are Fandom Roulette.
Two nerds with a passion for
History,
video games,
tabletop games,
and, well, really any nerdy stuff that comes into our lives.
While we might not be able to name every ship classification in Star Wars,
Or every Pokemon.
or every spell in the player's handbook,
Well, one of us can.
we're still here to have a good time.
Good evening. Whenever you're listening to this. Welcome, everybody, to Fan Roulette. I'm Joe.
And I'm Cody.
And on Fandom Roulette, it's a podcast where we talk about a myriad of nerdy things, including history, video games, tabletop role-playing games, and other games, and whatever nerdy stuff we're up to or we're thinking about at the time. All right, so I'm not going to do that the entire podcast because that was exhausting. Hey, Cody, what nerdy stuff have you been up to recently, my friend?
I have played a lot of Destiny 2. The new expansion came out, and so that is, besides the usual D&D prep that I had to do, because one of my groups came back. We did
Oh, fun.
Yeah, so we were on a kind of a big hiatus because of scheduling conflicts, so I'm back to...
That's never once happened.
It's never happened before.
Yeah.
And
here's what they don't tell you in D&D school is that you're always going to be able to play no matter what.
Yes, they don't tell you that, but it's totally 100% true, and I would never lie on the internet.
That's true. You can't lie on the internet.
Yeah,
Mark Zuckerberg
it's actually
made it illegal recently.
Oh, yeah.
Did you hear about
So
this? Mark Zuckerberg made it illegal. He was like,
cool.
No.
Super cool. Love that dystopian future.
Yeah. That would be... All right. Interesting.
But besides D&D and Destiny 2, a whole lot of nada. What about yourself?
Oh man, I had a busy couple of weeks or whatever. I over the weekend I played a session of Scion 2, which is a modified storyteller system, which I feel like, so we played a game in college and I came to the game kind of late, and I'm a little bit older and a little bit like wiser as a role player, I would say, whereas like in college I was like, I just want to fight everything all the time always, and now I'm like, oh man, I like want to build multifaceted characters and interesting things like that. And so it's a system that like rewards people like thinking outside, not that D&D doesn't, mind you, but like my character in the Scion game isn't particularly like physically capable, but she is incredibly like intelligent and charismatic, and so like I was able to kind of avoid a boss fight for our group by successfully lying to another character and things like that. It was fun.
Very cool.
Yeah, but the big one is this Monday. I went to go see WWE Raw.
Oh shit! They still do that?
Yeah, it fucking ruled.
Oh man, that sounds like it fucking rips. Love it. Tell me more about it.
Well, over the past couple of months, I've like been like learning a little bit more about wrestling and like kind of getting into it a little bit, because it was something that like when I was a kid, I didn't understand why it was popular, right? Because like I was like, but don't people know that it's like not real? And now I realize that that's part of why it's great, because I would say like it's 75-25, right? Like the beefs and the feuds and junk are like all fake, but like theirs are like still like really talented athletes who are like doing, you know, what is, you know, sometimes stage combat, but as I heard a wrestler say in an interview once, like I want anyone to just like fall gently onto like the mat of a wrestling match and tell me how much it hurts, and then imagine being dropped by like a dude who is 6'2" onto it. Like, yes, it's springy, and yes, like they do things to make sure that you're not getting like destroyed, but it's still like pretty physical. But yeah, it was really interesting, mainly too because like they do like international tours. So the one side that we were seeing, the Monday Night Raw side, a lot of their stars were in Australia, doing like an Australian tour. So we got to see some pretty cool matches. But like there was no women's matches, and that was kind of a bummer. But it was a whole heck of a lot of fun. And the other thing that like really got me interested in wrestling was the idea of kayfabe in like the real world. So like kayfabe is that idea of like, oh hey, you're now fighting with your best friend, and you have to sell it in the ring. But like, you know, afterwards, like when you go backstage, like you and your best friend are like now hanging out and like having a great time because, you know, you did a good wrestling match. And there are some wrestlers who are like very serious about like maintaining their personality all the time, always, no matter what. And there are other wrestlers who are like very open about like, yeah, we're kind of like super fancy like we're super athletic actors. And so that was always kind of fascinating, but it was fun. There was some good fun wrestling. And I got to see, to keep it spooky, I got to see Bray Wyatt's The Fiend, which if you're a wrestling fan, you know what I'm talking about. But super quick background: there's this guy who's a wrestler named Bray Wyatt, who's a very talented like actor / writer, who developed this whole thing where he was like the leader of a Louisiana swamp cult. And then his house got burned down, and then he disappeared for a while, and then he came back as like a demented Mr. Rogers, who kept talking about how he was being controlled by this force called the Fiend, and he has this super scary mask and like just pops out of the ground and like attacks people and stuff, and it was super cool to see him live. When he comes out to the ring, he has a lantern that is like looks like the disembodied head of the Louisiana swamp cult leader with like a light bulb in it. Pretty spooky stuff.
Damn, that sounds fucking weird as hell, and I love it.
Yeah, if you get like, you can watch all of them online. If you look up like Firefly Funhouse, it's called, and like that's the whole like demented Mr. Rogers bit where he's like starting off. He's like, "Hey everyone, welcome to like Firefly Funhouse. I'm gonna be painting a picture." And then like it turns around and it's like a burning house with like a person like screaming in the window or whatever. It's very creepypasta-ish. And so to eagle-eared listeners, I guess Fox, what's good at listening? Foxes? Yeah. To people who are,
yeah.
To people who are great at listening, you might notice that my voice is a little scratchy this week, and it's because I screamed it out at Monday Night Raw. So
yeah.
Woo. Yeah, which is also coming in really handy when I'm doing my other job and I have to talk loudly over a bunch of school children.
That sounds like you use your voice quite often.
Yeah, it's a voice heavy job. But anyway, this week we're getting spooky.
Yeah, spooky episode 1 of season 5. Love it.
Yeah. And our 3rd annual Halloween Spooktacular. 3rd,
yes.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is
Jesus.
number 3, baby.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
This was like episode 2, right? Like our Halloween episode was like episode 2 or 3, right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
It's pretty early on.
So yeah, this is like kind of like our 3rd year anniversary too. Check it out.
Oh yeah, neat.
That's neat. Happy anniversary to us, kind of, sort of.
Yeah. What'd you get me?
I got you the history section.
Gasp! I never would have seen it coming.
Yeah, I know, right? I prepared for us a little thing about history. So in the past for this section, we talked a little bit about vampire, and we talked a little bit about witches and witchcraft. And then so to continue this theme, this year we are talking about werewolves.
Ooh. Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna start off with a little bit of background. So the word werewolf comes from an Old English word which is literally just to drop one of the E's and turn the O into a U. It's a werewolf, which literally translates to man-wolf.
Nice. Yep. Super easy. By the way, it was episode 3.
Was it episode 3?
Yeah, I just looked it up.
Or sometimes they're referred to as lycanthropes, which is a Greek word which just translates to wolf person.
Nice, like it.
So in both cases, we see a pretty similar like naming convention, right? It's literally just a person who turns into a wolf. And in most, there appear like lycanthropic creatures appear in a lot of world cultures. There is some evidence to suggest that perhaps in terms of like the American context, it might have something to a teensy bit to do with more colonialism than like Native American cultures like developing their own lycanthropic narratives. If that is incorrect, please let me know. But my research, it looked like it might have been an idea that Europeans brought with them. But the interesting thing about werewolves is that the what's the word I'm looking for? Specifics kind of vary from legend to legend and place to place. So in some cases, werewolves are people who can transform fully from man to like a wolf. So you go from your human form to your wolf form. Or in other cases, it is a person who is, more like the Wolfman, where they have wolf-like features and they have like claws and fangs, but they still are bipedal and they still have a certain level of human intelligence or things like that. The other thing too is that the way that one becomes a werewolf kind of changes from narrative to narrative, but most frequently it is something that is passed along. It is like a disease. So if you are bitten or scratched by a werewolf, there is a decent chance that you will become a werewolf yourself or a lycanthrope. And then the thing with the cursed one is that in the cursed cases, it is more of an involuntary transformation. So, it's the association of the full moon. Whereas there are some other lycanthropic narratives that talk about, if you put on the belt of a wolf skin that is cursed, then you become a werewolf. Now, the thing that's sort of the idea that I'm going to be presenting in this little history section, this little diatribe, if you will, is a little bit about how werewolves are, much like a lot of other things, an othering factor or an othering agent. So let's begin. So we have evidence of werewolves or lycanthropes dating back to as early as Greek and Rome. In Herodotus' The Histories, he talks about discovering like this island where people would turn into wolves for a couple of weeks every year, things like that. We're going to get into that a little bit in the main season, but what I'm more focused on, what I'm more interested in, is the Middle Ages and the Middle Age depictions of werewolves, because like a lot of things, this is something that was originally a sort of Germanic pagan tradition. It's possible that, or rather, there are some who believe that, there were some Viking warriors who were trying to channel like the strength and the tactics of the wolves. And so, they might have been wearing wolf hides as a way to channel those energies, not suggesting that they were actually themselves becoming wolves, but wearing these like totems to kind of bring the strength of the wolf into them. But like quite a lot of things, when we get into sort of the Christian reshaping of things like myth, legend, and things like that, the Christian church kind of took on this story of making it more like a curse or something that was afflicted. Much like witchcraft, this was something that the person made a deal with, like the devil or a demon or something like that to give them their original powers, and then so consumed by the sort of trick of that evil, it becomes a curse, and then it's something that they pass along to others. Now, this is something I personally learned myself as I was doing this, because I had never heard of this before, and I found it really interesting, is that in a while, for a while, not quite as extensive as the witch trials, there were werewolf trials. So I'm going to tell a little story about a dude named Peter Stumpp, with 2 P's.
Nice,
so
like it.
Yeah. So Peter Stumpp was a farmer who was living in what now would be called Germany. But at the time, Germany was actually just a number of loosely aligned principalities that were often fighting with one another instead of with Europe in general. And Peter Stumpp was accused of werewolfery, witchcraft, and cannibalism, and was given the nickname the Werewolf of Bedburg. Can
we stop for a moment to appreciate werewolfery as thing you could have been tagged as in the Middle Ages? Isn't
it the best name ever, or the best thing ever? It's pretty.
I want to
be
into
cool.
werewolfery.
Well, okay.
Maybe not back then, but
hold on to that thought for a moment.
Cool. I like where this is going.
Okay, so like I said, Stumpp was a fairly he seemed like a farmer who might have had a bit of like power, because at this time this was still a time when like land equaled power. So obviously he wasn't as powerful as, like, say, a lord or a prince or something like that. But certainly if you had a certain level of land, you had a certain level of influence, maybe over just your neighbors or something like that. Now, the reason he's called Peter Stumpp is because he was missing his left hand.
Damn.
And so he had a stump instead. So sometimes you'll also see him referred to as like Peter Stubbs, Peter Stubb, Peter Stumpp, other things like that. Now, here is the thing.
Fucking rude. Hold on. Yeah. People called him Peter Stumpp because he was missing a hand?
Yep.
Like, what the fuck?
So, I mean, like,
what about, like, male pattern baldness? Like, did they just start calling people, like, oh, well, that's Steve Baldy? Like, what an asshole.
Probably. That's possible.
God.
I mean, okay, so, like, here's the thing is, like, so many surnames roughly do translate to, like, occupation or, like, in a lot of cases of Irish and Scottish descent, like O or Mick, like, denounces or notates, like, it's basically son of. So, like, if your name was, like, Dan O'Malley, then you were Dan and you were from the family of Malley, who is probably a 4444 father, something like that. The idea of surnames comes kind of weirdly, like, later in history, mainly because, like, princes and royalty would have surnames, mainly because it, like, denoted who your family was or your lineage or things like that. But if you were a peasant who was, like, waking up and falling asleep, it didn't necessarily matter to a certain degree. Like, it didn't matter for things like lineage or power or things like that. But anyway, back to our good pal Pete. There were people who were noticing weird things afoot. And the wolf that would sometimes stalk and attack their town was missing his front left paw, much like Peter Stumpp was missing his front left hand.
Damn. What a bunch of bullshit. Who would have... What a coincidence that the fucking wolf who came to town was missing a hand and he's missing a hand. They're just like, oh, that's him. Book him.
Freeze, this is the medieval police.
He was, like I said, he was wealthy. He was a widower who had a couple of children. And also, he happened to do a little thing, which was convert to Protestantism.
Oh, fuck. I know where this is going.
So this trial began in 1589, considered to be like one of the most, I guess, important werewolf trials in history, which, like, fucking that's a sentence, huh?
What a time not to be alive.
Right? So, in the case of Peter Stumpp, he had argued is of the brand of lycanthropy where he was given a magical belt by the devil that could force him to transform into his wolf form. Now, conveniently, the belt was never found, but also conveniently, he was tortured on the rack for a long period of time. He admitted that this belt that was given to him by the devil made him into a great wolf that he could use to defeat and eat his enemies. He was accused of eating goats and sheep. He was described as a bloodsucker. He was accused also of eating men, women, and children, referring to children as like
delicious little morsels.
Basically was accused of being a serial murderer and a cannibal while in this form, this great wolf form that was missing its front left paw. So because he was found guilty of werewolfery, he had his flesh literally torn from his body with red hot pincers. Sounds pretty great, right? And then basically he had his, so after this, they broke his limbs. And then they beheaded his body and burned it on a pyre, mainly so that he could never come back, because he had gone with the devil, and he had sold his soul to the devil, and so of course he was going to be able to come back. Now, I mentioned earlier, and you kind of alluded to the fact that you saw where this was going, that Stumpp was a Protestant. The person who was the ruler of his little town of Bedburg was a Catholic, and very much wanted to reestablish this area as being a Catholic area. And so it's probable, I mean, we can't know for sure, right? But it's pretty probable that this was all invented to remove a prominent Protestant from power. Like I said, he wasn't a prince or a duke or the owner of a castle or anything like that, but he was wealthy and he owned a lot of land, and that gave him influence over his fellow people who lived in this town. It's probable that these greater things were brought against him to scare the local populace, because consulting with the devil was a bad thing.
Hey, that's fucking rude.
Eating men, women, and children, pregnant women, your own children, was a bad thing.
I disagree. Eating children is fun.
And it was this man who was a Protestant who was doing all of it. So we can never know for sure. That's like one of the things about history, is we can never pass judgment. But it's very clear that people used werewolf or lycanthropy or being a werewolf as a way to not only scare the populace, but a way to take someone who is different than you and give you grounds to punish them, remove that threat. And, you know, if you can forge evidence, or if you can create enough doubt in the minds of other people, even a person who was presumably well liked, or at the very least respected, could too be flayed on a wheel and pulled apart. So there you go. That's a little bit about werewolves. I want to end with one last quick little thing, which is that there was actually a time where scientists were doing research to try to determine if there was like an actual medical sort of, what's the word I'm looking for here, Cody? Medical rationale
Condition?
to, or like a medical reason that people might believe in werewolves.
Oh, okay.
The other thing that I failed to mention a little bit earlier is that there were signs that you could look at a person and go, oh, that man is a werewolf, which is that even out of their wolf form, they might have been a little bit shaggier. People having bushier eyebrows, or maybe even unibrows, were were accused. And so it's possible that these people might have been suffering from a condition of hyperchosis. I might be saying that wrong. Which was a thing that created excessive hair growth, or someone else, you know, there are other theories, or that perhaps these were people who were suffering from rabies, because rabies does perhaps make people act a little bit more uncontrollable, maybe act a little bit more wild, because this is a disease that kind of penetrates, you know, your brain and things like that. And it is also something that was transmitted through biting and things like that. So there you go. That's a little bit about werewolves. Do you have any questions for me?
Man, that's all fucked up. You're telling me
It
that
is.
all that Team Jacob shit is from, like, fucking terrorizing people because of what they believe in? God damn it.
I mean, hey man, I will say, for me personally, I don't know, maybe you'll disagree with me. I always found like werewolves to be kind of sympathetic characters in a lot of things.
Okay.
Because the idea of this is something that you were given, you did not have control over it. This was something that once you have it, you cannot control your change, your transformation.
Right. Losing control is definitely the theme of werewolf type stories.
Yeah. Whereas with something like, say, vampires, for instance, like, you know, obviously your victims do not choose to become a vampire. Sometimes it depends on the story or things like that. But like, there is a level of, like manipulation on behalf of the vampire. Like, yes, they need to feed, but they also create these like elaborate traps, and they create these elaborate situations to get
it's
people...
intentional. They know that they gotta live, so they're like, fuck it, YOLO. Whereas like when you're a werewolf, usually it's like, oh, I fucking full moon, I passed out, woke up, and like there's like 12 dead animals next to me. I'm fucked, you know?
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, I mean, man, it's all messed up, right?
So, question for you.
Yeah, sure.
What is your favorite from all the different types of werewolves? What's your favorite?
That's a great question. So I enjoyed the book Full Moon by Jim Butcher, which is book 2 of the Dresden Files.
Okay.
Which establishes 3 kind of like levels of werewolf. So and it basically it's clear that the author did some research into like mythology and werewolf, because you had people who could put on the belts and become animalistic. You had lycanthropes who were kind of like they're bigger and they're aggressive, but they're humans. They can never actually transform into wolves or into the animal that they're lycanthropic. But it's more like they have like the brain of a wolf in the body of a human. And then there are some people who can transform into wolves. It's not at the full moon, but sometimes the full moon makes them a little bit more. It heightens their aggression. So I liked that one. Do you have a favorite werewolf story?
Werewolf story? Gosh, probably not.
Okay.
I don't. It's been so long since I've actually read anything werewolf related.
Yeah.
Ever since Twilight, I just couldn't help myself anymore with werewolves.
Wolfman's kind of a classic, right?
But I do like but I've seen werewolves in tabletop games, video games, all that kind of stuff. And I do think my favorite version of it is the lycanthropy, where it's you transform into this kind of bipedal fucking brick shithouse that also has claws and shit. Whether or not you lose control or whatever is up in the air. I think thematically or like narratively, I love the idea of the person fighting their primal urges. But if I were to be in a situation where I was one, I'd rather be in control. So more of like a shapeshifter than your standard werewolf, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with that.
Cool.
Yeah, well, it's time for the
middle section.
Hey everyone, welcome to the middle section.
Welcome.
Yes. Hey Cody, I have a question for you.
Well, hit me.
I want to ask you guys a question that you'll answer on the show, or show you a funny like meme or tweet I discovered. How can I do that?
Well, you can tweet at us at fandomr_podcast. That is our Twitter handle.
It's a pretty good Twitter handle. Now I have another question for you, Cody.
Yes.
I want to send you a longer response or I want to send you a longer thought. 240 characters cannot contain my theories. How can I send you my longer ideas?
You can send it to us via email at fanroulettepodcast@gmail.com.
Very nice. Now, Cody, I want to tell my friends how to listen to Phantom Roulette Podcast. What are some places where they can find Phantom Roulette Podcast?
We're on iTunes. We're on SoundCloud. We're on Google Play and Spotify. And you can also go to our website at www.fandomroulette.com, where all of our episodes are, with links that take you to our various platforms. And we're also on YouTube, although it's not as up to date, but we'll get there. And if you want to listen to all the beginning stuff, like episode 3, where we first kind of introduced this Halloween Spooktacular, feel free to hit up our Fandom Roulette YouTube channel. You can just search Fandom Roulette.
And then is there any other social media that you guys are located on?
Yeah, well, you already heard our Twitter, but we're also on Facebook and Instagram.
All right. And then is there anything else?
I think we had it all.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
All right.
But also, you can find us by using werewolf summoning circles.
Yep.
We will show up with a pack of wolves.
Yep.
Make sure you bring a lot of meat, because usually the wolves are hungry. I'm usually smart enough to eat before I go somewhere, but like sometimes they're getting caught in, the work shift and all that stuff. So yeah,
also,
be careful when you summon
wear stretchy
like that.
pants.
Yes, definitely wear stretchy pants. It is embarrassing to come back and your pants have just like completely shredded. It's oof.
And then let's see. And also you can find us on Angel Fire.
Yes, definitely Angel Fire.
Oh, we got that joke out of the way. Check that. Doop. All right. Should we head back to the show?
Yes.
So anyway, Cody, what video games are we talking about this week?
So that's just it, man. When we came up with this topic, I was like, cool, perfect. I know all sorts of video games, and I've seen some werewolves in video games. The problem was, there aren't too many where you play as a wolf. There's a couple of exceptions. There's the Telltale game Fables, where you play as the big bad wolf, which I don't really consider a werewolf, as more of like a bipedal, like, hairy man.
Yeah. Yeah. The Fables it's an interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanna kill werewolves, there's tons of games. You got like Castlevania, you've got the Elder Scrolls series, you have, there's tons of games where you kill werewolves, but to be one, there's like 3 that I'm even like aware of. Sans like fighting games, because like Altered Beast, I guess, technically has a werewolf in it. But like there's Skyrim, which
yes,
you have to get the DLC that has werewolves in it. But I mean, you can buy Skyrim for like $5, so it's kind of whatever. Mm-hmm. Also, Sonic Unleashed.
What?
Yes, Sonic Unleashed. Sonic turns into a werehog.
Wait, what?
Yeah, so he's a hedgehog, yeah? So he turns into a werehog.
So he turns into like a half man, half hedgehog?
Well, he's already like half human-esque. So he just gets like furrier and like bulkier, and that's about the difference. It's not a good game.
As we learned in the middle section, werewolf literally means man-wolf. So a werehog would just mean a man-hog.
Yeah, I mean, Sonic is already technically a werehog before he transforms into a werehog.
I mean, I know what they're going for. I just wanted to be pedantic.
Yeah, it's not super great, but this kind of brought up a really good point, which is thematically, playing a werewolf doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. Because I feel like there's 2 different reasons somebody wants to play a werewolf.
Okay.
And most of them fall into, man, I want to shapeshift into a badass bipedal man wolf that'll beat shit up.
Yep.
Or woman wolf.
Yes.
Let's be correct here. Or cis wolf. Whatever kind of wolf you want.
Mm-hmm. Non-binary wolf.
Yeah. So, like, you either want to be a shapeshifter, which I get, because, like, that's fucking badass.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like a lot of people enjoy the idea of losing control in a game or in a medium where being in control is, like, the perk of the thing.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So, I think in video games, it's like, you mostly are a shapeshifter. Mm-hmm. And now I could see them making a game where you're basically playing 2 separate games. One being you're doing something completely different, and then you'll shift into the werewolf where like you're just trying to get through the level, killing everything in sight. I guess it could be an interesting game depending on the kind of thing you're doing, but like,
sure,
I don't know. I find it difficult to thematically and mechanically play a game where you're quote unquote losing control and falling to your primal urges without it just completely taking away player agency, which at that point it's like, all right, let's get past the fucking werewolf part that's boring. So that being said, there are none. They're not, I mean, the closest you can get is Skyrim, but, like, you don't lose control. You're basically just a badass in wolf form. Uh-huh. So, but that's it.
I remember, if I could jump in for a second.
Absolutely.
I remember, I think I've said this on the podcast before, is I, like, didn't really grow up with any video game systems or anything like that.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, I'm like a gaming neophyte, but I played a lot of like Flash games on like, fucking what's that website called? Like Newgrounds and shit. Yeah,
Newgrounds, man, I remember those days.
Yeah, I remember. Oh man, there was kind of an interesting thing. So I remember there was a while there where there was a run on those like escape room games. And
yeah, those are super popular.
There was one called Don't Escape.
Oh.
And the premise is that you are a person who had lycanthropy, who has basically an hour until sunset, and you're trying to figure out a way to restrain yourself in such a way that you do not get out and attack the townsfolk.
Okay.
And I remember, like, it worked for a short flash game, but I thought that was kind of an interesting idea.
Yeah.
You're trying not to go, beast mode.
Yeah, and I mean, that could be a game in its own right, where if you were to change into that form, you either lose or, like, there's some kind of, like, drastic penalty. Like, I think there's a game there. I think it just takes so, like, people, like, especially developers these days, it would be a very complicated game. Yeah. And something that would be mechanically very difficult to achieve without feeling, like, disjointed or kind of not playing up the theme of the werewolf. Again, it's kind of like trying to make a Cthulhu game where you don't die at the end of it. Like, because that's like H.P. Lovecraft's game is, hey, you just learned about the cosmic horrors of reality, now you're dead.
Yeah, right?
It's something that's faithful to that notion is kind of like, it kind of defeats the point of playing a game. Because, you're in it to get to the end. I mean, granted, the most recent Call of Cthulhu game, I feel like, did a pretty good job. Because, like, at the end, stuff got fucked up and things were still pretty, like, messed up. But you still felt like you could win, even though in the cosmic scheme of things, it didn't matter. So, I don't know. Like, it's one of those you got to be careful and, like, it's probably going to be super difficult.
Yeah. I think the level too is how do you maintain that, like, level of sympathy, right?
Right.
And maybe not everyone views werewolves the same way I do, but like I said, like, there is a certain level, like a certain tragic element, and, like, in almost every case too, like, the third act revolves around some degree of, and you also have to murder your, like, best friend, for instance.
Right. Well, and then, like, usually how these things resolve is the werewolf dies. So, like, if you're the main character, you die? Like, you played this whole game to get to this point, only to have some monster hunter, like, stab you with silver? Like, that would feel pretty shitty.
Yeah. No, yeah. It's an interesting thing for sure. And I think it's one that is a tough nut to crack, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I don't think, I'm in the belief, much like Luigi in the Super Mario Brothers movie, that things are unlikely, improbable, but the, like, impossibility in this realm of video games is just, that's not a thing. Because, shit, I would have never thought that someone could make a fun game where you play a very basic premise of being a goose. And here we have the Untitled Goose Game, which everyone fucking loves. So, like, my brain's been blown.
Or a game where you play as a dude at a security checkpoint.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's so many possibilities, and I think it's there. It's just unlikely right now.
Sure. But yeah. Interesting. I liked that. That was a nice little conversation about, like, player agency and what's up with video games. Like,
yeah, because I didn't really necessarily want to just be like, here are games with werewolves in them.
Sure.
Here you go. That's the podcast.
I never thought about it in those terms before of the difficulty, because like I said too, like, like with vampires or whatever, there is a certain level of, like, ooh, like, are you, like, the scheming Dracula type, or are you, like, a more aggressive, like, the Lost Boys type, or are you like, the Twilight type,
Yep.
Yeah. The ones who are, like, I guess, super sexy gods or something.
All I know is they sparkle.
They do sparkle.
They sparkle in the sunlight because sun's bad.
That's true. Well, except it's not.
Oh,
We shouldn't put it highlight.
yeah, we shouldn't shit on the Sun. Sun's doing a really good job.
Yeah,
It's trying.
Good job, son.
Good job, Sun. You
Good
earned
job,
it.
A plus.
You
Hey,
get
Cody.
a gold star. Uh-huh.
Hey Cody.
Yeah.
Would you look around your room real quick?
Yes. It's
Are
dark
there
in here, though.
Are there people around you?
No.
There should be, because you and a team of adventurers is here.
Yeah.
Now, I have a question. If you don't have the answer like on hand, that's okay. Do you happen to have the answer for the last you and a team of adventurers from the season finale?
You know, as we started recording, I thought to myself, what the fuck did we do last time?
Right?
What was the last one? Fuck.
I don't remember. We can cut this. We're not gonna cut this.
No, there's no way I'm gonna fucking cut this.
We'll have it at the next episode.
Wait,
if we can remember.
Can you remind? I was the one who said it. Yeah.
Yes, it was yours. So I have one ready for you.
What? Do you remember what your?
Sadly, I do not.
Was it the Resistance Fighters?
Yes, it was Resistance Fighters.
Okay, so forever, I have it. I have the answer too.
Okay.
For those of you about a month ago who wanted to know what the it was a while ago. So the question was, you and a group of adventurers are resistance fighters trying to save your new home from the empire you left behind. Your party consists of a mix of multi-class fighters / sorcerers and fighters. And the answer was Steven Universe.
Oh, shit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. You like that? Just blow your
that.
mind?
That's good. That's what I like about this game.
You could have said a couple of different things.
Sure, right?
Like I think Star Wars could have kind of. I guess that you didn't technically leave the Empire behind, although Luke's family did get fucking blasted on Tatooine. So,
what little I know about Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
of that there. Yeah, but no. I like that a lot.
Yeah,
and I have one for you.
Yes, hit me.
Okay, so I worry that this is a little bit too easy, but still.
Okay, well, hit me up.
The category is film.
Okay, film. Got it.
You and a team of adventurers have to defend yourself from a person who can attack you when you're most vulnerable.
Ooh, I think I got it.
Yes.
Can I ask one leading question?
Of course.
Is it related to the general theme of this episode? This specific episode?
It's spooky.
Yes. All right, I got it. I won't say it. We'll do it for the next episode, so that everyone else gets a chance. But if you could,
yes.
What would your party consist of?
That's where things.
I feel like if it's the one that I'm thinking of, like kind of like a little bit of everything.
Yeah. There's a lot here, and I think that's the other thing too is, like once you learn, you're able to change what you are, to attack.
True.
So,
yeah.
I would say, they're all warriors to a certain degree.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then they have some degree of magical powers or reality manipulation. So
cool. Yeah. I really like this one.
Cool.
So yeah, we will tell the audience next time what this was.
If you have a guess, tweet at us with your response at Fandom R Adventures, right? That's what we've been using.
I think so. Yes.
Let's go with that.
Yeah.
It'll be new. If it's new this time, it's new this time. So.
Yeah.
All right. And now,
the
to the
tabletop
grand
section.
finale.
Yeah, this is my favorite part.
Yeah.
I had a really good idea. So
Okay.
for the audience, the idea that we wanted to for the tabletop role playing game section is, and I guess this would be specific for Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. So sorry for those of you who are not familiar with 5e. We will try to keep the terminology pretty basic so that you can understand. But the idea was that we're going to answer today how to make a werewolf PC or player character. How can one of your characters become the werewolf?
Now
I'm imagining like a mixed vampire werewolf scenario. Like fucking the Count got bit by a werewolf, so now he's like, I want to. Oh wait, shit! Wow!
Well, because vampires can turn into wolves.
In most of the pop culture that I've consumed, they are very specifically different things.
Yes,
and you can't
exactly.
like mix them up.
And then at some point, someone had the idea, like, what if they hated each other, and are like in an never-ending war?
Isn't that just Underworld, the movie?
But I mean, like, it's so many of them, right? Like,
it truly
Twilight,
is. If you have both, yeah.
Twilight has werewolves versus vampires.
Yeah, but they have a weird love triangle, so they're kind of together in that one. No. If you think about it.
Okay, I'm not going to.
So, anyways, I would like to hear what you had for how to make a werewolf player.
Yeah.
For D&D. So hit me up.
So I was. This is a nut I have been trying to crack, since college.
Wow, that's a long time.
And mainly it's because this was something specific to that character I played in college that I had never necessarily thought of. But when we were in college, we were all kind of busy and things like that. And our DM kind of gave us a task, which is he wanted us to think of reasons like why our character might not be in like a scene or in a session, right? So it's like, oh man, I have a big paper due like tomorrow. I'm sorry guys, I can't play D&D tonight. And so, like we would have things where like at the beginning of the session, oh, like X thing happened and now my character is named Arthal. Arthal won't be able to like be here this week, right? And so like I thought of like a really simple thing, which was basically like, oh, I was a barbarian and it was not necessarily by blood, it was by like a sort of ritual. And when you became a full member of the tribe, like every couple of, every fortnight or whatever, you were controlled by like kind of this like insatiable like rage bloodlust, and he became animalistic, and my character would remind himself of that and like try to run away and hide himself in the middle of the woods away from human beings. But that always struck me as like it was a conceit if I could not be there, as opposed to a facet of my character, right? And so I've been thinking about a couple of things, which is one, I want to kind of capture the sadness of the lycanthropic condition, that sort of idea of I do not only do I not have control, but it's something that I'm actively trying to fight against and remove. And so I did a couple of things, which is one, I had I personally would talk to the DM and I would build two separate characters, right?
Okay.
Character A would be my normal, character A would be my day-to-day character, right? And it could be anything. It could be a ranger or a monk or a cleric or a fighter or hell, even a barbarian. But character B would be a barbarian and would come out in rage mode with rage rules applying. So, it'd have to be it wouldn't last forever because that'd be kind of broken. It would follow all the rules. If you didn't attack, there would be some kind of penalty or things like that. And then, in order to, the DM would hold on to the werewolf form, sheet. And then, the two of us would work together, to determine, if it's either like I was thinking in my head it would be a wisdom save, that you would have to do, that, depending on situations and things like that, at the discretion of the DM, would become more difficult in certain situations. So perhaps if you're closer to something that is radiating a certain type of magic, perhaps the save becomes a little bit more difficult. Perhaps it's a set amount of time where every couple of weeks it just becomes that much more difficult to fight against this curse that's coursing through your body. So like every, for lack of a better one, the full moon, the DC becomes incredibly difficult and it's something you have to deal with. Or, to make it to a certain degree like the Hulk, and make it so that in incredibly stressful situations, it becomes more difficult to contain, or rather to maintain your composure. I think that this is something that you and the DM would have to talk about. I also think that they would create potentially interesting situations because, let's say you were in a non-combat situation and the DM sort of makes you do your lycanthropy check. When you come out, you're in rage mode no matter what the situation, and you have to start attacking things pretty much immediately. So it could create situations where a seemingly tense negotiation could become a full-fledged combat. It could ruin your reputation in a larger area or things like that. So the idea is two kind of separate characters, with a constant sort of check hanging over your head that gets more difficult situationally based on factors that you and the DM worked through together. So that was my idea.
Very cool. That's actually very similar. So,
really?
A game that I'm playing in.
Oh, cool.
So, I DM 2 games and I play in a third. I know, but I don't know how I do it. But in our other game, the party's druid acquired lycanthropy.
Oh, hey.
And they basically do the same thing. It's a wisdom save every time a certain event happens. And when they fail, they turn and the party's DM has a stat block for the werewolf and then kind of runs it as an enemy while, other stuff is going on. So it's actually pretty similar to what our DM created.
Okay.
I don't think he created a separate character. I think he used a very particular stat block from 5e, but more or less the same thing. Mm-hmm. So, and the reason we talk about this is the base rules for lycanthropy in D&D Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition don't really set up a good way to make werewolves interesting on the party.
Yeah.
There's basically a spell that removes it, and basically after level 5, it's super easy to acquire. The rules are very ambiguous on purpose. Like, you get certain buffs, but the player might lose control, and the whole thing just kind of doesn't really sit well with the heroic adventuring theme that the game has for itself. So, I get why they didn't put a lot of thought into this. Mm-hmm. But my 2 cents, it kind of depends on what the player wants. So if they want to be a werewolf, or they really just want to shapeshift into a bipedal badass,
yeah,
personally, I would just modify the barbarian. I would make it so that their rage is their wolf form. They would have they would have melee. They wouldn't use weapons in this form, but their claws basically scale to the right amount of damage. I would probably reflavor a lot of the quote unquote rage abilities, and then for the sake of flavor, I would make them weak to silvered weapons, or, you know, they're able to be hit with silvered weapons and stuff like that. Another idea, if you want to get really fancy, I would say creating a whole new like class with like the druid and barbarian in mind as like very good like alternatives to that. This would take a huge undertaking of how character classes are built, but could be a really cool way to have a werewolf. I don't have one specifically because I don't have that kind of time, but but if they like the idea of losing control and going into the animal urges, and that's like appealing, I really like your approach. I like that you would, you know, because base game, it's like you get a buff and like you lose control. And so you would just have to make saves during certain moments. And the party basically has to beat you unconscious to like stop the transformation or whatever. Mm-hmm. This can add some really interesting moments. But I would say this, tread with caution on this one.
Sure.
And I would probably bring the player aside, because this totally removes player agency when there's transformation. And player agency can be a really touchy subject depending on who you're playing with. So I would definitely talk to the player, because like, if that's going to be such a pain in the ass and they really don't like that, then I would just stick with like, oh, the party's going to go on a quest to remove the curse, that kind of thing.
Sure.
But I really do like the idea of using the barbarian and tweaking its rage a little bit so that instead of rage falling off after the, you know, because the barbarian rage in 5th edition is basically you can choose at any point to get, you know, just Hulk out and get angry, and you get buffs. You punch harder, you push things, you know, further, all this kind of stuff. But the rage ends if you're not attacking something or being attacked. I would probably tweak this, so that instead of you lose rage, you have no choice but to do those two things.
Yeah.
So that sometimes might mean that you're going to attack a party member. And granted, this is something you talk with the entire class, being like, hey, I want to play this werewolf character. I have an idea, but, you know, I want that idea of potentially losing control. Here's some options.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing if they're okay with the idea, like, oh, we're going to party with this guy who hulks out and turns into this, like, fucking killer. I think the barbarian is a really good class for it, if I'm being honest. Like, a good base with some tweaks. So that's what I came up with after I was, like, looking and trying to see, like... Because initially I wanted to do a moon druid hybrid thing, but, like, I feel like giving someone magic when they really just want to, like, you know, eat people and stuff like that, like, kind of felt counterproductive.
Sure. I would agree with that.
But those were my thoughts. Barbarian is such a fun class to, like, edit and turn into this that I
Tweak
think
with,
it's...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It almost was like it was like I said, like, I think one of the things about when I played it in college was it was almost too obvious. I was a barbarian who goes into like an unintentional rage. That seems kind of easy. But yeah, I think that this would be interesting. I don't know if I would necessarily want to do this like a sustained thing, but perhaps like in a one shot, I would try out something along those lines.
Yeah, I would be interested to see this as a multi-class option.
Yeah.
Where if you get bit, instead of it being like, you know, like you gain this level in Wolf, and yeah, that means you're going to be a level higher than everybody else, but you also have the chance to freak out. And if you remove the curse, or, you know, there's a higher chance that people are going to want to kill you because you're murdering people.
Yeah.
So like there's some risks and rewards for being a wolf, and I think by adding it as a, not necessarily that being your class, but giving you a level in that class as a kind of a multi-class thing would actually be fairly interesting to see play out.
Yeah.
And if you wanted, like, you're succumbing more to your wolf-like nature, you can take more levels in the, wolf/barbarian class, which would be interesting.
Yeah, it certainly could be a route to pursue. And who knows, maybe if you do something like that, you can gain more control over it over time.
Yeah, exactly.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, like at level 20, you're like, you rage, but you stay in the form the whole time, but you don't have to attack party members and shit like that or whatever. Yeah. Like, I don't know if I would do it at level 20, but that would just be a benefit of being that high in that class. Would be like, oh, you have complete control. You're just a fucking badass.
Yeah, I think that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
Shall we wrap her up?
Of course.
All right, thank you guys so much for listening to Phantom Roulette. The Spooktacular. Please go back to the middle section to learn a little bit more about our social media. If you could give us a follow on podcasting things where they have these things, if you could like, rate, review, subscribe, all those things, all those little things like that add up to moving up those ladders so that more people can find it. Please share an episode with a friend if there's something in here that you think they might enjoy. Check out our YouTube, all of that good stuff. And thank you guys so much for listening. We appreciate it, and we're getting ready for the next season. So, signing off for Phantom Roulette. This is Joe,
and I'm Cody.
And as always, stay nerdy.
Stay super nerdy.